Welcome to Lesson 3.3, Completing the Square Part 1. In this section, we're going to continue talking about different ways of solving quadratic equations, but before we get to this method, let's fill in with a little background information. First of all, the whole chapter, or this whole section, actually hinges upon these two shortcut rules. These two shortcut rules that you learned back when we were talking about factoring, or when you had the review about factoring quadratic equations. And it's going to be really important that you can recognize these two shortcuts within a problem. Like, you should look here at this first example right here, and you should be able to see that it is, in fact, the first perfect square trinomial shortcut. And I'm hoping that you can, in fact, see it when we write that out and we do it in just a different way. Hold on, I will explain here in a second. Like, do you see that 4x squared is 2x, that quantity squared? Do you see that 25 is 5 squared? And that the middle is when you take the 2 times the first term, 2x, times the last term, 2 times 2x times 5 gives me 20x. Therefore, I can factor down this trinomial to be 2x plus 5 times 2x plus 5. Or, if I'm writing it a different way, 2x plus 5 squared. And getting it to this last step is what's really important in this section. Take a look at the second one, the second example, 49x squared minus 42x plus 9. Do you see the perfect square trinomial? Take a minute, see if you do. You can pause the video. Do you see that it's 7x squared? Do you see that the last term is 3? Do you see the middle is 2 times that 7x times the 3? 2 times 7 is 14 times 3 is in fact 42. So we get that 42x there. So therefore we can factor this down and rewrite it as 7x minus 3 times 7x minus 3, or 7x minus 3 squared. And it's negative because of that sign that's right there. Let's take a look at how we can use this shortcut to solve some quadratic equations. So here, number A, we have x squared minus 16x plus 64 equals 100. When we're going to solve using square roots, it's really important we have to be in the form of something squared before we can use it. Remember, we talked about this before. And since these are not as that something squared, right? We have something squared, but then we have this minus 16x. So it's not in the form of just one thing squared. So since it's not, we have to rewrite them so that they are. And because this is a perfect square trinomial, right? We can rewrite this. That's x squared minus, and then we have this, the 4 squared. I'm sorry, not 4, 8 squared, my bad. And then the middle is that 2 times x times 8 gives me the 16. We can rewrite this as x minus 8, that quantity squared. Bring down the equals 100. Now we have it written as something squared. We have this something squared. So therefore, we can solve it using our square roots like we did in the previous problems, or in the previous section that we did. So we can simply take the square root of both sides. That will give me x minus 8 equals, don't forget the plus or minus, the square root of 100 is 10. And that would give me two problems, that x minus 8 equals positive 10, that x minus 8 equals negative 10, and I could add my 8 to both sides and get x is equal to 18, or x is equal to negative 2. Both of those are acceptable answers for this quadratic equation. Let's take a look at B. 9x squared plus 24x plus 16 equals 49. All right, so again, let's make sure you recognize that this is, in fact, a perfect square trinomial. Do you see the 3x? Do you see the 4 that's squared? And then in the middle, you get 2 times 3x times 4. And 2 times 3 is 6, times 4 gives me the 24. That is, in fact, what we can rewrite this down to be 3x plus 4. That quantity squared. Don't forget the equals 49. Now we have it in that quantity squared, so we can, in fact, take the square root of both sides. That will give me 3x plus 4 equals, don't forget the plus or minus, the square root of 49 is 7. Rated as two problems. 3x plus 4 equals 7. 3x plus 4 equals negative 7. You can subtract your 4 from both sides. That'll give me 3x, and then that would give me x is equal to 1. On the other side, you got 3x equals, well, negative 7 minus 4 is negative 11. That doesn't work out to be a very nice number, but it's okay. Fractions work too here. So I'd like you to try a couple on your own. So here are 4 problems. Go ahead and pause the video right now, and you can try out these 4 problems, and then we'll work through the solutions together. So take a minute right now, pause the video, try these 4 problems out, and then we'll go over the answers together here shortly. Now, the nice thing is you kind of know that these are already perfect square trinomials, so you should at least be able to very quickly get to x plus 2, that quantity squared equals 36. And then you'll take the square root of both sides. You'll get x plus 2 equals plus or minus 6. And you should be able to subtract that. So split that to 2 problems. Got the x plus 2 equals 6. The x plus 2 equals negative 6. And you'll come up with your 2 answers of 4 and negative 8. What about number 2? Recognize that as x minus 3, the quantity squared equals 1. You'll take the square root of both sides. You'll get x minus 3 equals, again, that plus or minus, the square root of 1 is 1. So you'll have x minus 3 equals positive 1, and x minus 3 equals a negative 1. Add your 3 to both sides, you'll get x equals 4, and x equals 2 as your 2 possible answers. Going on to number 3, you got x squared minus 22x plus 121 equals, well, okay, so again, recognize this as being x minus 11, that quantity squared equals 81. You'll take your square root of both sides. You'll get x minus 11 equals plus or minus, the square root of 81 is 9. So split it to your 2 problems. Add 11 to both sides, you'll get x equals 20. Add 11 to both sides, you'll get x equals 2. The last one, number 4 here. What are you going to do? Well, again, recognize this is your perfect square trinomial. You should be able to get to 2x minus 9. That quantity squared equals 36. You'll take your square root of both sides. You'll get 2x minus 9 equals plus or minus, the square root of 36 is 6. So that's 2x minus 9 equals 6. And 2x minus 9 equals negative 6. Go ahead and add your 9 to both sides on this first problem, and you get x equals 15 over 2. Add your 9 to both sides, you'll get, let's see, 2x equals 3. You get x equals 3 over 2, and those will be your 2 answers for that quadratic equation. So we're now going to set the table for solving by something called completing the square. But before we can solve a quadratic equation by completing the square, we actually have to know what completing the square really means and what it is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, we're going to use these 2 shortcuts, and for a, so x squared plus 14x plus something. So the question is what's in the box that would make it that perfect square trinomial? And what am I talking about here? Well, let's see here. If I know how that is, I know that it has to be something squared. Okay, looks like that first term already has the x. And plus 2 times, well, there's my a. My a term is x, right? Those would always match. And then times something, because it's that same something that I'll square that I'll put in the box. So what goes in that box? Well, let me think about this for a second. I want it to end up to be 14x in the middle. I have a 2x. I'm going to multiply it by something else to get it to 14x. So 2 times x times what will give me 14x? Did you say 7? That's exactly right, which means 7 squared is what goes in the box. Or in this particular problem, 49. 7 squared is 49. That's pretty much the way this is going to work. You're always going to take this middle term right here, and you're going to divide it by 2. You're going to take that b term, and you're going to divide it by 2 to get this number that's going to go right there into the box after I square it. Let's try that out with letter b, right? X squared minus 40x. So I get negative 40, which means, according to that shortcut, negative 40, or just 40, divided by 2, which is equal to 20, goes into this box. 20 squared will go into this box. So to complete the square, I would get the number 400. And that, in fact, does work, because then this x squared minus 40x plus 400 would factor down to give me x minus 20 squared. And if you wanted to try that out, You could, of course, write x minus 20 times x minus 20 and FOIL that. But it's always going to be that middle term divided by 2 and then square it. And that's what's going to go in this last box. So instead of having a box, what we're going to do is we're just going to use some constant c. So your job in these 4 problems is to find the value c that's going to make that perfect square trinomial. Or else, in other words, you're going to try to figure out what goes in the box, where the c is the box. So go ahead and try these 4 problems out. Go ahead, pause the video. Some of them are harder than the others, but go ahead and find out and see if you can figure out what c would be in this problem. Go ahead, I'll be here and we'll go over the answers here shortly. All right, so let's take a look at number 5. X squared plus 8x plus something. What's that something going to be? Well, according to my rule, if I take this 8 divided by 2, which is 4, which means 4 squared is going to be right there. So 4 squared is 16. So c is equal to 16. And we'd have that perfect square trinomial, x squared plus 8x plus 16, which could be factored down to be x plus 4 squared. What about 6? Let's look at 6. Well, again, if I took this value right here, this 2, and I divided it by 2, I get 1, which means 1 squared is going to be my value for c. So c is, in fact, equal to 1. So I'd have x squared minus 2x plus 1, which, in fact, would factor down with that perfect square to be x minus 1 squared. What about 7? Ooh, that's not a nice number. Well, okay, sure it is. We still do the same thing. We still do 9 divided by 2. 9 divided by 2 doesn't work out okay, but that's okay because the c value is going to be 9 divided by 2 squared, which if I did the math, that's 81 fourths, which means c is equal to 81 fourths. So x squared minus 9x plus 81 fourths is going to be that trinomial, which would factor down to be x minus 9 over 2 squared. Okay, a little tricky, but we can do that, no problem. What about number 8? Ooh, this one's the wild card. Okay, check it out. You have to look here. This one is going to work a little bit different. It's not going to be as easy as b divided by 2 because that value in front of x squared, there's a 4 there. So we got to think about it. We got to think about it the way we thought about it before. Whoops. 2 times that first thing, that 2x times what is going to give me 12x? Because whatever is right there in that parentheses, that's actually going to give me almost my value for c, almost the value for c. So let's hear 2 times 2x is 4x. What do I multiply 4x by to get it to be 12x? The answer is 3, right? 2 times 2 is 4 times 3 gives me 12. So that would work out, which means my value for c is 3 squared, which equals 9. So to complete that square, to figure out what goes in the box with this problem, it's 4x squared plus 12x plus 9. Which I would factor down to give me 2x plus 3, that quantity squared. Okay, we're of course going to practice more of these problems. No shortage of practice with these. But if you have any questions, please, of course, as always, let me know. Good luck with your classwork.